Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It's July 1st, also known as Bobby Bonilla Day.
Yes.
Episode 114. Happy Bobby Bonilla Day to everybody. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe. It's a 5-star rating. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Chuck McTinnick, Don Harris alongside. Bobby Bonilla Day, my favorite day of the year because it just means that it's another day to just relish in how stupid the Mets are.
I know it's a great day for Bob, for Cyber Bob, because it was the biggest engagement tweet of my Twitter career, and it made you very happy.
Well,
it was about 5 years ago.
Remind me of
I tweeted something about Bobby Bonilla Day, and I think it was before it was kind of referred to that. And I said a reminder, and I explained it, and some guy in New York picked it up, and then it exploded.
Really?
Yeah, and Cyber Bob was so proud of me.
For people who don't know,
Still am.
Bobby Bonilla Day is basically back in the early 2000s. Bobby Bonilla was a player. He got signed by the Mets, and he deferred most of his salary to get $1.35 million every July 1st until like 2035 or something like that.
Like 30 years.
And the Wilpons, who owned the Mets at that point, only did that because all of their money was tied up in the Ponzi scheme. With Bernie Madoff, and they lost $500 million or something like that. So they couldn't pay him outright. So they were like, "Why don't we defer your salary?" And now it's on Cohen or whatever his name is, the owner of the Mets now, the really rich owner. Now it's on him to pay Bobby Bonilla $1.35 million every July 1st.
But you know what? I saw somebody say that it was actually a good deal for the Wilpons because with the interest that they saved on the money that they didn't pay him up front, that basically they make money on the interest. And it's great for Bobby Bonilla because you don't go spend all that money foolishly as a young player. But it's also good for the Wilpons because they made that money in interest.
I mean, that's nothing compared to the Shohei Ohtani deal that he just signed. That, what was it? $680 million was deferred or something
Righteous
like that?
bucks.
Righteous bucks, man. All right, we got a lot going on. Let's get to some real stuff. Chris Paul, already a San Antonio Spur, 1 day into free agency, at least intended. He hasn't signed yet because you can't sign until next week, but I digress. Spurs already making moves, so we got all the details, reaction to that. Plus, are the Spurs now done making moves? They are linked to a lot of big names, including Lauri Markkanen, who is probably the prize of this trading pool of players right now, probably the prize, the apple of a lot of people's eye. So we'll talk about that. Plus, Don is full of pizza and draft opinions. He's back from Brooklyn. We haven't really talked to him about the draft yet, so he'll open up the notebook on how the draft went for the Spurs, Stephon Castle, Harrison Ingram, all those guys. But first, as always, we start with the number game, 114. Number 14, I don't know why. The first person that came to mind was Andy Dalton. The TCU product, Andy Dalton, was the first person. I don't know why when I think of 14, I think of him.
It's not a bad one.
You?
Ernie Banks.
Pete Rose?
Pete Rose is another good one.
Yeah, Pete Rose was second, but Oscar Robertson.
Good one.
Okay.
I
I think
thought
of
you were gonna
Oscar
say
Robertson as one.
He was one with the
Bucks.
but he was 14 with the
Royals. That
yeah.
outdates
See,
even
guys,
me, man.
Jim Rice is another good one.
Jim Rice
Yeah.
is a good one. Jim Rice is good. I think of Pete Rose, and of the Pete Rose conversation, I don't know your guys' opinion on this. Should he be in the Hall of Fame, yes or no?
I refuse to answer that based on how it was this number one sports talk subject when sports talk was born, and it was worn out for 20 years.
I'm going to spend 20 seconds on it. I just want a yes or no.
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 All right, I think he should be, but whatever.
Just on the haircut alone.
Hey,
No,
so Otto Graham wore number 60 for the Spurs, for the Browns for the majority of his career, but then they forced the quarterbacks to start wearing
Single
Low
digits
numbers?
and lower
in the
numbers.
14. So they retired him as a 14, although he wore 60 for
Really?
most of his career.
Also on the list of 14s, Danny Green. Danny Green, the
There's
Spur,
another good one.
Cody Carlson.
Cody Carlson's another good one.
Danny Green, I wanted to mention just because in 2014, obviously, the Spurs won their last championship. 2014, they beat the Heat. I was actually, over the weekend, I don't know why, but I was looking up highlights just on YouTube because I'm a nerd sometimes. And I don't know why I wanted to see it, but I wanted to see that the second that the Heat knew that they had lost that series, and it was the second that Manu Ginobili jammed over Chris Bosh. That was when everybody knew that the series was over, the game was over, the year was over. Like, everyone knew that the Heat had lost that game as soon as Manu dunked over Chris Bosh in that moment.
Game 5.
Game 5 in Miami? No, it was here. You're right. Also in 2014, the Seahawks defeated the Broncos 43-8. We'll just pass right over that. The Giants defeated the Royals 4-3. Madison Bumgarner was the MVP. And the Spurs beat the Heat. Kawhi Leonard, the MVP. That was the last championship. And now maybe the Spurs are on track to win another one. Yesterday, the Spurs signed 12-time All-Star Chris Paul to a 1-year, $11 million deal. The first of a lot of free agency dominoes that are going to fall. This is what Brian Wright said the day after the first round about the possibilities of signing people in free agency. Let's play that one first.
We want to build something that's sustainable, and you got to build it brick by brick, and we hope to do that. But I think all the decisions that we've made to this point have been under that premise. We know that we've got a great runway here. We've got some great young talent, and we look to build around them in the right way. Turns
out that building around them the right way is signing a 12-time All-Star to a 1-year, $11 million deal. He's third all-time in assists. He's a 17.5 year. Over his career, he's averaged 17.5 career points per game. He is never won a championship, and everywhere he goes, he wins. So what do you guys think of the deal?
Well, it's you're not getting that player. You're getting a guy who averaged 9 points a game last year. You're getting a guy who's had some injury concerns. But there's a couple of – this is so nuanced and so layered. You have to spend money to come up to the minimum salary apron, but you can't jeopardize what's coming next summer. So the 1-year deal makes sense for the Spurs. $11 million is nothing. It's a good move. I think it's a great move for the Spurs. I'm not sure how it benefits Chris Paul if you would think that he was going to go ring hunting. And so I'm interested to know what was said between him and Pop about his future after this season, and whether that involves coaching at some sort or being involved in an organization. He's a former Players Association president. I got a text from Alvin Gentry this morning who said, this is going to be so great for Wemby and Castle. He will teach them every intricacy about the angles of the pick and roll. He's the smartest player I ever coached. This is great for San Antonio.
Alvin was with him in New Orleans?
He was with him with the Clippers and in New Orleans.
And the Clippers, that's
right.
He
coached him 2 different times. He coached him. He was Doc's assistant when
in LA for Lob City
with the Clippers. Yeah. And so that's what Chris is known as around the league. Pop loves him. They've been associated with USA Basketball. If he comes in here, I heard ESPN saying he's energized by this. He wanted to start again. Well, okay.
He might.
I think he might, but as long as he's cool with his role, as long as he's cool with the development of Wemby and Castle, and not a negative influence but a positive influence, I think it could be hugely beneficial to the Spurs. And I'm sure that was discussed with him before they got him.
Yeah, I mean, I had to take a couple notes on this because my mind's kind of all over the place on this too, okay, right? He's 39. He gets a 1-year, $11 million deal reportedly by ESPN. So what does that tell you? Was he sought after? Maybe. That could be within the realm of possibility. Is he chasing that elusive NBA title? I mean, we have to hear from him. I mean, do the Spurs think that they really turned the corner the last 15, 20 games of the year last year and they're adding pieces at this point? I mean, I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff going through my mind. Look, we do know this. The guy did have 6 assists a game last year, even at his age. And, he was on a really talented team last year, albeit an aging one, in Golden State. But it's a great signing from the Spurs in terms of what you pointed out. It's not going to break the bank. It's a 1-year deal, and it's only $11 million. It gets them to the overall threshold that they need to get to in terms of minimum dollars spent. So this guy still sees the floor like very few humans on the planet do. I mean, that's still a given. He's going to control the pace when he's in the game. What will that pace look like?
It's going to be slow. It's going to be a slower pace. He's always been kind of a slower player.
Right? Okay, but Will he be a starter? Will he be the guy coming off the bench? I have to believe at this point in his career, this is going to be more of a role player position on the floor. But you're for sure getting, again, Don, to your point, you're getting a remarkable leader, a guy with skins on the wall, a guy that's been there, done that, seen that. And I think ultimately this is where, Don touched on this too. Chris Paul, let us not forget, was one of the most influential players in the last CBA, right? So if there was a Mount Rushmore when that CBA was going on, he would be one of those guys that you would put that was very, very influential in terms of what he did for the players and the league in terms of getting everybody to the bargaining table, agreeing to something, and really pushing the envelope in a lot of ways in favor of the players in places that I don't know that they had ever been before. Quite frankly, I don't think they had been. So, there's a lot of fascinating things about this signing. And I guess at some point you have to believe that. So Chris has done a remarkable job in the business world, in the entertainment world, all these different things while he's built a basketball resume. Why wouldn't coaching, with as much money as there is to be made at that post-career, isn't this the kind of guy you want coaching players in the NBA at 100%. Some point? I mean, so why not come here, even if it's for a year, to just see how they do things? You're going to learn what to do and what not to do, like you've done every step in every facet of your career, on and off the floor. This is a perfect move for Chris Paul if he's thinking about staying in the league in some capacity, whether it's coaching or front office or anything.
I think there's a lot of different facets to this. There's the why the Spurs wanted to sign him. There's the why Chris Paul is looking to go to the Spurs. And both of them obviously are looking to get different things out of this, but you're looking to get a similar result by accomplishing those things, Yeah. The Spurs are looking to have that advice, that veteran in the room, that adult in the room with all of these kids around, with Vassell and Trey Jones and Wemby, and the list goes on, Stephon Castle. And then I think he will start, because whether he's an elite point guard right now or not, obviously he's not. They're not signing him for who he used to be. They're signing him for who he is now. He might start, but he's not going to get those starter minutes. He's not going to play 36 minutes a game. He might play 28, 24, something like that. Trey Jones comes in and plays the other 24, 20. Stephon Castle comes in and does that. It's not – they're doing everything they can to get away from the Jeremy Shohan crap show. That's the closest I've been to cussing on here in a while. Crap show that they had for the first 30 games last season. They're not going to make that mistake again, so they're bringing in that veteran that can really show everybody, this is how you go about a season. This is how you go about the pick and roll. This is floor spacing. This is XYZ.
Yeah, and how many times last year were the Spurs up 9 with a 2:47 left and lost? And we would just say, God, if they just had a grown-up on the floor in the last 3 minutes of the game, who's managing this clock and those kind of things? Many times. I would say more than a dozen games they lost when they had leads in the last few minutes. That won't happen with him. That will not happen with him. And again, to Chuck's point, the respect that Pop and RC have around the league as the best run organization in the league, like you said, he wants to see how they do it. He's heard about it. You've heard about how, and I see him as Jason Kidd. I see him as a next great coach. There's a lot of similarities.
He could be, for sure.
A lot of similarities there. And to Chuck bringing up the CBA, he's the guy, and it's so different now because the players get a majority of the revenue. It used to be 49, 51 owners, and now it's just the opposite. And the salary cap just went up again, and the new TV deal is going to kick in. And guys like Isaiah Hartenstein are making $30 million a year. Just mind-blowing stuff. Wemby will soon be the first $100 million a year player in the next decade. And Chris Paul is the guy who famously slammed the hand on the table and pointed his finger at David Stern's face and said, "Don't talk to me like that. You're not my dad." And that CBA changed. Adam came in as a lot softer on the players, gave the players a lot more things like All-Star break being 10 days and all those other things. But Chris Paul was behind the players getting the things that they deserve.
Yeah.
What's he going to say when Pop talks to him?
Well, let's call a spade too. Chris Paul is one of the most intelligent players in the NBA.
Yeah.
One, basketball IQ, but two, just smarts.
Yeah.
He's just a very intelligent person. And so bringing that to the Spurs, where you have some boneheaded mistakes that happened last year with Vassell and with Shohan not really knowing how to play basketball on certain nights, like you have to believe that influence that he's going to have on the other players is going to nip those in the ass pretty quick.
I would think so.
Bob, any questions from anybody right now before we go to the Pop angle of this?
We got a whole lot of people watching right now.
All right.
We got a ton of questions.
Hey,
coming
thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Renee Flores says CP3 has an attitude problem and throws hissy fits when the game is not going his way, which distracts him from winning a ring. What do you guys think about that?
He's had it on the floor a couple times,
He's
but
one of the most competitive people you ever meet, and he does not like to lose, and that has been in his past. Look, I'm not saying he's perfect by any means. He didn't get along with Blake Griffin, but you look at 20 years of growth, right, and where he is now, and after playing with Steph and Clay and those guys, he already was willing to take a step back once. He's taking another step back. He's smart enough to know this is the end of his career. I do not think he's going to be the Houston
or even the
Chris
Suns.
Paul. Well, he was good in Phoenix.
Well, I know,
He
but
was great
that
in
was
Phoenix.
4 years ago. Like that's what I'm saying. Like it's not like he's deteriorated that much. However, MJ didn't get along with a lot of teammates either. There's a lot of people that don't get along with a lot of teammates, and they still go on and win a lot.
And
of
he's at a
stuff,
different place in his career. Like I get why he and Harden fought. There's an alpha question there. I don't think he's coming in here to be the alpha until I think Pops asked him and trusts him to be the mentor to Wemby and Stephon Castle and this next group of kids. And I think he'll do well at it.
I've always liked that about his game. I like the guy that's a pest on the floor and a little bit of a pain in the you-know-what. Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure it's curbed over time, but having said that, this is the kind of guy that always is. If he's on your team, you love him, and if he's on the opposition, and so much the better.
Bob?
Spurs fan says Spurs will finally not miss an opportunity to pass to Wemby or get over themselves if they have the thought of not passing on purpose because they feel they have the tough shot instead of the dunk.
How the best thing about this is that he was the point god during Lob City. Like, we're going to have plenty of lobs to Wemby now with Chris Paul on the floor. He knows how to throw a damn ball, that's for sure. So.
Yeah.
Hey, another one. Fabian Flores says, are we still possibly going to make other moves?
For sure.
Yeah, we're going to get to that here in a little bit. There's going to be there's a lot more rumors circling around right now. I want to get to what Coach Pop said real quick. When the Warriors visited Frostbank, played the Spurs on March 11th, Coach Pop was asked after the game about Chris Paul. This is what he had to say.
He's one of the all-time, best competitors ever in the league. He's a great leader, great competitor. It's always fun to see him. He's up there, one of the best.
I think it's extremely telling what Pop's role in this was, because immediately as soon as this got reported, I think it was Chris Haynes that said that Pop helped seal this deal. And Pop sold him on the culture, sold him on what they were trying to do. I think that's extremely telling that, one, Pop is playing that role of trying to get Chris Paul here, but two, it shows you, for all the Spurs fans out there that are kind of hitting the panic button, like, what is our plan? What is our plan? It shows you that they have one, and they're not going about this just willy-nilly. It's a very methodical, strategic plan to build a winner, create a pipeline of talent for this team, and and win over a long period of time.
I think the thing that's come out in the last year or so is this impatience by Spurs fans because we've been so spoiled. We got David Robinson and Sean Elliott in the same year. Terry Cummings, those guys joined up, and they went from 20 wins to 60 wins overnight. And then the only other really rough season they had in 96, they get Tim Duncan, but that was because David and those guys, Sean and those guys were banged up. So they go from 20 wins to 60 wins overnight. This is the first time that Spurs fans have ever had to go through the valley for this long a period of time. They're one of the most successful franchises in all of pro sports. They've been in the playoffs more over the last 50 years than any franchise in professional sports. So now we're going on, year 5 or so of this wilderness. And so there's this impatience. But if you look, and I've said this a million times, and it's hard, I guess, because Wemby's 20. But the plan is ages 24 to 34 have a chance to win them all because nobody wins at 20. I was watching that Giannis documentary this weekend, and Giannis won in year 7. And you go back and look at his body from age 18 to where he was when he was ready to win. LeBron was the same way. Michael Jordan was the same way. David Robinson was the same way until he got Tim. He got some help. It takes time. Wemby is so special that we want to go, yeah, let's go now. Let's go get all these guys now. They're putting all these assets, these draft assets, this salary cap space. This is a great move example of it, of why. They got $40 million next summer in a great draft and in a great free agent class. So it's just they're going to get there.
Chuck, what do you think about the conversation in the talk of Pop and Paul?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what I found fascinating about yesterday was we actually got Chris Paul's phone number. So we called in, right?
That's true. It's funny. And he answered.
And he was very pleasant, I will say. He said, after I told him who I was, he said, hey, he goes, give me a second. I got to unlock the doors for my camp. And then he hung up. And then he was on NBA TV not that long afterwards. So, Chris, if you're watching, we still have an open invitation. You can call the podcast.
You can
it's
call
210, blah, 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 blah. So I'm interested to hear.
He went on NBA TV and gave sound?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
I want to also get to this. Less than a month ago, Paul was on the Pat McAfee show, and they asked him, who do you like playing with? Who do you want to play with? Who do you like in the league right now? And, of course, there was a certain name that came up. This is what he had to say.
Who do you like?
Who do I like?
Yeah.
I sound like a lot of the guys in the league.
How about Wemby? That's just different.
Oh, man.
Wemby. Play with him?
Wemby is different. Wemby is the guy that after the game in the locker room, we all was talking about playing against him because we literally all had to change the way we shot a little bit.
Yeah, because there's highlights of like Steph Curry driving into the lane, having a wide open shot and being like, nah.
It wasn't just Steph. It was half the league.
It was legit a 45-second clip of like 10
you saw that, right?
Yes.
So my favorite shot, obviously, is when I snake back to the right and I shoot a fadeaway, right? And I got a picture of Wemby trying to block my shot. Man, I shot the ball so high, I didn't make it because I usually don't have to shoot it that high. You know what I mean? But and I think he's going to be so successful too because he's very competitive and he's likable, right? And he loves the game, and you don't see guys that size moving the way he moves.
They've been preparing him in his body. He's been doing like foot and ankle.
Y'all seen that? You seen how flexible and all that
They've
stuff?
been doing that since he's like 12 years old, I guess.
Man. They knew something.
He's taking notice. He knows that what
Or he's
they got.
planning his future.
Yeah, he knows what they got. That was literally that was June 6th, and less than a month later, he's signing to go to the Spurs. So I just wanted to play that. One last thing on the Chris Paul thing before we get to some other stuff. I put this on Twitter last night because I feel like it illustrates a really good point about the impact that Chris has when he goes to places. When Chris Paul got drafted by the Hornets, it was then the New Orleans Hornets. In 05-06. The first year he was there, they went from 18 to 38 wins. When he went to the Clippers in 11-12, they went from 32 wins to 40 wins in his first year to 56 wins in his second year. When he went to the Rockets, they went from 55 wins to 65 wins. When he went to the Suns, they went from 34 wins to 51 wins. And then when he went to the Warriors, I didn't put this on the tweet because I ran out of characters, but everyone's roasting me because I didn't put the Warriors down. When he went to the Warriors, they improved by 2 wins. But they get better when he gets there. Obviously, he's not that elite player he was. That is unquestioned. But he still impacts winning. And I feel like if you look at it as an $11 million player, $11 million elite player in his past that can help out the young guys, as a Spurs fan, you'll be very satisfied with this because he impacts winning in that way.
Well said.
Agreed.
Let's get to some other stuff here. The Spurs, what are they going to do elsewhere in free agency? So there's a whole lot of stuff that has been rumored to go down. The biggest one, and by the way, breaking news, Klay Thompson just signed to the Mavericks for 3 years, $50 million. So we're not going to get into that today because we're not going to have enough time, but that happened. Are we going to expect something bigger? They've said, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to pick our spots, kind of all that stuff we heard from Brian Wright earlier. Do you guys think that this was the big move or that there's other big moves planned for this year?
This is a 1 year.
For this year, though.
No, they've got another. Now, I don't know if they're going to be as big. I don't know if there's going to be one big one or 2 small ones. But they're still going to have, I don't know, $20 million. I think the Lauri Markkanen thing is interesting based on his upcoming free agency next year, and they might can get him next year in free agency without having to give up players. They're talking about the trade market this year because Utah wants to get something in return, that it would take maybe Keldon and Jeremy and a pick. Is that price too high to pay? Are the Spurs willing to give him the extension next year at what he's going to require? Or are they saving that for Devin Booker or someone else? Only the Spurs know.
Yeah, I really am intrigued by the Markkanen thing, too.
I am too.
I would like to see them make a move that makes sense, that you're doing something that is in your long-term interest. And, I don't know that they would be able to retain Markkanen, but they certainly have the cap space in order to do so, I would think. So, it's something like that. I think that if I'm a Spurs fan, I would like to see something of that ilk, that we go into an offseason, we're coming off back-to-back 20-win seasons. If it were to stop here, and I'm with Don, I don't think it stops here, but, you have one draft pick in the first round that you keep, and you sign Chris Paul to a 1-year deal. This doesn't speak to anything that's going to benefit you long-term. Now, it's possible that this is the plan all along, that maybe this is another stopgap year till you can start really doing some wheeling and dealing next year when you've got, believably at this point, more talent going to be infused into the draft next year. And then, what free agency looks like a year from now as opposed to what it looks like this year. So, again, to Don's point, only the Spurs know.
For me, sorry, go ahead.
I think if you get Markkanen in a trade right now and he doesn't sign the long-term extension, then you risk giving up Keldon, Jeremy, and a pick for nothing.
You'd have to set that in stone beforehand.
Right, beforehand.
Like,
So what I'm saying,
we're going to trade for you, but this is your extension.
Yeah. So is he the guy that you want to commit that max to? If he is, then do it now. Why not? But if he's not, then it'll be a smaller piece this year, and they'll go after the free agent that they're targeting next summer.
Another person that they had been linked to is Nicholas Batum. He just signed with the Clippers.
He's
he's gone.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's like a smaller move. That's like a little bit less than a Chris Paul type move.
But let me ask you guys this: would you give up Jeremy,
yes,
Keldon, and a number 1 or 2? I would, as long as it's not the Atlanta picks, because the Atlanta picks could be the number 1 pick in the draft.
You're taking words right out of my mouth. That's what I was just about to say. It's so crazy how the entire Spurs future hinges on these Atlanta picks that they got in the DeJounte trade, because now those could very well be the first pick this year in 2025, the first pick in 26, and the first pick in 27. You could easily have one of those years be the first pick in the draft, because they have a pick swap in 26 and they have both picks unprotected in 25 and 27.
Yeah.
So if you're giving up your pick, if the Spurs are going to be like, you know what, we'll give you our pick, but we're not giving you Atlanta's pick.
Don't give Atlanta's pick up.
I get that. When it comes to Markkanen, I'm all in on Markkanen. I'm out on Shohan, really, unless he's going to be a bench guy. I don't think he's a starter. That's just me.
I mean, you hate him so much you can't even say his name right.
I don't know how to say his name. I'll just say, I'll be honest. Sohan, is that what I'm
That's
saying?
it, yes.
All right, there we go. I choose not to say his name. I'll say his name right.
You say like Show
I say
Ohtani.
show. I say show.
Ohtani.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's spelled Sochan, so I want to say Sochan, but at least I'm not doing that.
You can.
Anyway, I'm all in on Markkanen because I think he's that stretch 4 that everyone wants. He's a double-double machine. He has really come into his own under Will Hardy, who is obviously a former Spurs assistant. He knows how Pop likes his players. Like, I could just see that being the 1-2 punch, the Markkanen, Wemby guys who are completely interchangeable at that 4 role at that point, because you have such similar body types, such similar games. Obviously, Wemby is far and away better than Markkanen is. I'm not comparing the two in floor talent there, but Markkanen would do a lot to help in that way. And I think he can definitely be that second running mate as long as they stay healthy. Ever since he got to Utah, he has been insane. He's the most improved player, averaged 25 points a game last year, 23 points a game this year. He's going in. He only costs you $17 million this year, which means the salaries could match up for him and Keldon to be traded person for person along with some picks. Here's where I disagree with you on what it would take to get him. I think it's going to take a Mikal Bridges type deal to get that. So I think it would take at least 3 ones and a couple of pick swaps to get him. I do. And because they were trying to, the reports are at least that the Spurs, or excuse me, the Jazz were trying to trade for Mikal Bridges, but the price was too high. And the Knicks ended up giving up, 4 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps or something like that. I think it's going to take like a Rudy Gobert type deal or a Mikal Bridges type deal to pry Lauri Markkanen out of there. However, if the Spurs think that is the player that they need, that's the player that is going to set them up for the future, and they are willing to pay him $50 million a year, which he will command next summer as a max free agent, then I think that you have to make the move. And if it was me, I would personally want to do that because I think Lauri fits exactly what they're trying to do.
Well, Utah's got to agree, and I don't know how the Spurs feel about it. I loved him in Chicago. Back when DeMar DeRozan was here and was going to go to Chicago, I was like, let's get Markkanen and sign and trade. I've loved his length is incredible. He dominated the Spurs a couple games when he was in Chicago and was so impressive. And he's, like you said, he's only gotten better. That's a steep price to pay.
He's 27 years old. You'd be paying for a 27-year-old player who hits free agency when he's 28. He signs the extension. You probably sign him to a 4 or 5 year extension. You have him until you're 31, 32. Wemby's going to be 24, 25 at that point. You let him go and you replace him with someone else. It just seems like that timeline matches up really well.
Yeah.
That's just me. But let's also get to Castle being a Spur before we get out of here. Obviously, we're going a little long. We're not doing an episode on Thursday, by the way. For anybody who's listening, we will not have a new episode on Thursday.
Chuck's in the hot dog eating contest.
Ooh.
I mean, someone's got to replace Joey Chestnut, right?
Just can rest assured I will not be putting that nonsense on TV.
Well, especially without Joey Chestnut there.
I got to keep my consecutive years streak alive of not putting that stuff on TV.
All right, Don, real quick, tell us about New York, what you heard, what you saw, what you thought of Castle, what you thought of Harrison Ingram. Kind of go take us through kind of your thoughts and the process of the draft, because obviously we haven't gotten to talk to you since you went.
Well, I mean, I think that's who we all thought they were going to take if he was on the board. I think there was a little bit of fear that Atlanta might take Castle number 1. I've heard from a lot of people that think he was the best player in the draft, not just on the board at number 4. Really nice kid, really smart kid, loves to be coached hard, played for Hurley, very smart to play in that offensive system, was a McDonald's All-American and the first to commit to UConn. Just an incredible potential. I think Kobe's body, not that kind of shooter, but it could be. Spurs fans are going to love the defensive effort. The one thing that I heard, though, which is a little interesting, is that there's some in the league who believed that the Spurs flip-flopped it, and that had they taken Salon at number 4, that they would have gotten Castle at 8. I don't think he would have stayed on the board till 8, but they really wanted Salon, and when he wasn't there at 8, that's when they traded that pick to Minnesota. So we could have come out of this, according to some, they could have come out of this draft with both. But I think they're doing cartwheels that they've got this guy in the program, and I think they think he has the kind of potential that they had when they drafted Kawhi. He's already better than Kawhi was on day 1. Now, he has to develop into that player. But as far as taking a raw kid into the gym, he's better than Kawhi was when they picked Kawhi 15.
He was introduced on Saturday officially at the Spurs facility. This is a little bit of what he had to say.
I feel like, I'm a perfect fit here. Just being able to, display my playmaking ability, create shots for myself, for my teammates. Just being at UConn, becoming a better screener, becoming a better cutter, just really, balancing my, all-around game. So, just being on the court, trying to do, everything that I can, rebound, push. Like I said, showing my playmaking ability, using my defense as an advantage for our team. So really just trying to do whatever I can on the court to help us win.
If nothing else in year 1, he's going to come in and he's going to play rabid defense.
They need more guys like this, right? That is going to put his nose to the grindstone and just go get people. That's it. And that stuff is infectious too. If you see a guy that's balling out on the defensive end, I mean, I got no problem with this pick at all. I mean, obviously he's got some gifts, 6'6" and 6'9" wingspan. He's going to be a pain in the rear end for a lot of guys that he has to bow up and defend. I love it. I mean, there's just nothing can come wrong from this. I don't see.
At the very worst, he's a 3-and-D guy for 10 years in the league, in my opinion. Like he's
so much better than that.
But he is. That's what I'm saying.
He creates his own mid range. I asked him. I said, "Who are you like? Like who would you compare yourself to?" And he shocked me. He said, "Shea Gill is just Alexander," and I'm like, "Really?" He sees himself as a true point. And you go back and you look at his tape. He didn't have too much opportunity to play point at UConn, but when you put the whole season together and you take his highlight clips and they put on playmaking and they put on defense and they put on shot making and all this kind of stuff, his playmaking, he's got that vision. He's got really good vision.
Before we get out of here, we've already gone a little over, but give us a few comments there, Bob, before we get out.
Just one for you from Carsick Colin. Joey Chestnut is the GOAT.
He is the GOAT, but
I won't debate you.
The fact that he's not going to be eating hot dogs on Thursday is a travesty. Let's just be honest.
He'll be eating hot dogs. He'll be eating veggie dogs in El Paso.
Vegan dogs. Overall,
you guys remember Sports Science on ESPN?
Yeah.
There was the time on Sports Science where they had like a clear esophagus and stomach.
Yeah.
And they shoved hot dogs in it and showed you what the stomach would look like if you had 73 hot dogs in 10 minutes. And it was the most foul.
It's disgusting.
Oh, gosh.
I can't actually watch the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. It grosses me out.
It does me too, but gross. Yet here we are talking about it.
I had a barbecue at my house on Saturday, and I grilled up 16 hot dogs, and I was like, there's no way I could eat this many, let alone 73.
How many did you try?
I ate like 2.
Okay.
I ate a normal person's amount. I had 2 hamburgers and 2 hot dogs. I don't know if that's normal. That's a big person. I'm a large person, but
your stomach gives you that signal that you're full. You just got to work your way through that.
The only time I do that is when I go to Cane's.
No pain, no gain, Bob.
Cane's is the only thing I gorge myself on because I love Cane's sauce so much. But anyway, it's been an entertaining free agency period already, and it's literally just started. So we'll have plenty to talk about next Monday. We will not be having a podcast on Thursday. Happy 4th of July to everybody.
Be safe out there with the fireworks.
Absolutely. Please nobody come back like Jason Pierre-Paul, like one hand, 3 fingers. Like don't come back like that. We want to see everybody's limbs attached on Monday. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Obviously, big moves being made by the Spurs. Exciting time, seeing how they're going to build this team. That's all we got for you today on the Sneakers Cleats podcast. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We will be back on Monday with some more from Don and Chuck and I. Until then, everyone have a good holiday weekend.